What's going on, guys, and welcome on in. My name is Elio, and in today's video we're going to discuss a little bit about the characters that we get to choose from with the 30 summons that the game gives you as you first start the game. So this is probably part of like a reroll guide, you could say. But let's go ahead and take a look at these heroes. Alright, so starting off here, you guys, we have Rafe. She is a shadow type, and then her element is going to be dark, and she's one of the many characters that we get to choose from in terms of the whole reroll process. But anyways, her first move, Ferocious Scythe, here deals 90% of her attack on the target and grants the unrecoverable state with a 60% chance for 2 turns. Now, what is the unrecoverable state? From my analysis so far, I could be wrong with this, but it seems like whatever monster that you're fighting can't really recover HP. So if there's healers on a team that are maybe out healing the DPS that you have, this could be very, very useful for you. Her second move, Transcendence, deals 80% of her attack on the target and refreshes the duration of debuff to 3 turns if the target is in the unrecoverable state. So basically, if her debuff is applied from her first move, this one is going to extend that out for, it looks like, another turn from how I'm reading that if it's done the next turn. And then her last skill, which is her special skill, Sentence of Reaper, deals 180% of her attack on a target. This is single target, it seems to be applied, and it's guaranteed to hit the target, so it can't move, and then it grants the unrecoverable state for 2 turns. So she's mainly based around preventing whatever mob that you're fighting from healing. So in the event that healing poses to be a problem for you because your DPS threshold isn't high enough to burst something down, this could be very, very useful. Moving on though, I mean, I do have her and her DPS is fine. I haven't really encountered anything like one day into the game of, you know, what is super duper incredibly hard, but I'm sure in the future it's going to be a lot more apparent. Moving on next though, we have Malavi, who is a shadow type as well, and her element is fire. Now this is the girl that I ended up choosing out of my free polls, just because her moves, at least to me, seem the most reasonable. So let's take a look at them. So Sword of Dragon deals 95% of attack onto a target. This is at level 2, so the base is 90, which is pretty usual at this point. Her second skill, Dragon Breath, deals 50% of attack on all targets, and here's where she got me. Here's where I got sold at. It doubles up on damage on the target with the highest HP, and then it burns all with a 75% chance for 3 turns. Now, I haven't really paid too much attention to how much the burn damage does, because stuff at this stage just dies from the active skill in itself, but my thought process behind this was burning is a very powerful debuff, at least in other games to some degree, and even if it only ticks off 5% of HP, that's 5% more of HP per turn for 3 turns that I get. And the real selling point was a double up on damage of a target with the highest HP, which in most cases is going to be the boss. So this is going to be 100% damage against the boss, and then 50% against the trash mobs, and it burns them. I mean, what more could a man ask for? And then her special, Dragon Ascension, deals 80% of her attack to all enemies, and once again it doubles up damage on the target with the highest HP. I have seen this work, and as oddly as it sounds, even though it makes sense, I have seen bosses die to this move before the mobs around them do, which is exactly what I wanted. And so far, I would definitely say she's on the top of the list, at least in my opinion or from my experience. Moving on next though, we have Kip, because I'm not going to slaughter the rest of her name, and she is a mage type and her element is dark. And let's take a look at her skills real quick. So Keyring Strike deals 90% of attack onto a target and boosts damage up to a number of debuffs. So it looks like actually buffs, not debuffs. So the more buffs that she has, apparently, the more damage you will get out of this. So that's very, very important if you want to utilize the most of her DPS. And then Kip's skill 2 deals 110% of her attack onto a target and increases 50 buffs to last for more 2 turns. I think this is just poor typing, but what I'm thinking is essentially that if you have a buff and you do something, basically this is going to extend the buff's duration by 2 turns. And maybe there's a 50% chance for that buff to be extended for 2 turns, but the damage on it, single target 110, that's pretty nice, especially for it not to be an ult. So it's more of a single target type character, but single target can be super duper useful as well. And then her last skill, it deals 100% of her attack to all enemies and still 2 buffs from the enemies. So this is kind of where the real strategy comes in with Kip. Essentially, you want to try and pop her ultimate as soon as possible. That way you can steal buffs from the target that you're fighting, which would then coincide with her normal attack skill, and then it would then coincide with her active skill, where you can essentially extend the duration of the moves that you have stolen or the buffs that you have stolen to get the most damage out of her. So far, I do have her as well, as we can see right here, and she's fine. I mean, I'm not going to say that she's incredible, but I'm sure as time goes on and there's more ways to apply buffs to her, I could definitely see her being a staple unit at least for a while. Moving on, next though we have Gaff, who I don't have. I originally was going to end up picking him, but let's take a look at his skills real quick. So Loyal Slash, it deals 80% of his attack to a target, and there's a chance to receive an extra attack with a 20% chance up to 1 time. So essentially, he can deal damage to a target, and there's a 20% chance for him to deal double damage. Now this, at least on paper, sounds good to me, but I was like 20% chance of me getting essentially like 160% damage onto a target. I mean, it's reasonable, but also not reasonable because its chance percentage is just a little bit too low, at least the way that this is worded at. And then Blazing Rise deals 110% of his attack onto a target and reduces cooldown of Proof of Loyalty by 1. And it reduces 1 additional cooldown from a crit hit. So if it crits, your Proof of Loyalty move essentially gets to skip 2 turns of a cooldown, which could be very, very important. And then Proof of Loyalty, which is his ult, deals 160% of attack onto a target, and there's nothing incredible about that. It just deals 160%, which, albeit, is a lot, especially for a single target skill, but we already have other single target skills that come near that. But I think the main selling point of this unit is just being able to get his ult off very, very quickly, depending on the RNG. And I would say, honestly, like, I haven't used him and I would love to have him, but he seems to be up there with Malavi, at least in my opinion. Like, he is more of a chance-based character, but if everything goes right for you, I could definitely see him being pretty good to have. Moving on, next though we have Airi. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, probably not. I'll call her Ari, and she's a mage type, and her element is light. So for her 3-star skill, she has, not 3-star skill, for her first skill, which is her normal attack, she basically deals 70% of her attack onto a target, and it switches the lantern color from blue to red every time it's cast. For her second skill, Rail Siren, it deals 50% of her attack onto a target, and then the Blue Lantern increases debuff hit rate by 50% for 1 turn, and then Red Lantern increases attack by 60% for 1 turn for all allies. So there is some strategy involved here, so she's not really an auto unit to have per se, because you don't want to basically have her do the wrong buffs or debuffs with accordance to what you're trying to do. But 60% of the attack for 1 turn for all allies is pretty damn good. Like, I'm not gonna lie to you, that's pretty damn good. So she's not really so much of a DPS unit, she's more of a supporter type character. And then her ultimate Train Call deals 90% of attack onto a target and lowers damage reduction rate by 7% with 80% chance for 2 turns. Once again, nothing really amazing. I mean, damage reduction rate by 70% is pretty decent, and 80% means, you know, there's a high probability of it proccing. But the most interesting skill from her is just the Rail Siren ability. So in this case, if you can get her to coincide with Malavi or Gaff at this point, I think that's going to be a really good idea, because with that Red Lantern boost for 60% for 1 turn for everyone on your squad, we're talking about a lot of damage. A lot of damage. Moving on though, we have Carson, who looks super duper poggers, dude. He looks awesome, and I was so hyped up until I pulled him and read his skills, and I was like, okay, never mind. So his normal attack, Sharp Strike, deals 90% of attack onto a target. Nothing crazy right there. His second move, Chain Elbow, deals 100% of attack on a target, And in his Black Myth state, it doubles the damage of this move. So this move does 200% of his attack onto a target. But with a 4-turn cooldown, that's extremely high. So you're really not going to see that move very much. And then his last move, Red Sands Wolf, it deals 140% of his attack onto a target and transforms into the Black Myth state that lowers defense by 30% and boosts his attack by 30% for 1 turn. This skill is fine because he's basically becoming more of like a berserker, but my main issue with it is that if you don't have Chain Elbow ready to go as soon as that move pops off on the next turn, it's basically useless. It's basically useless. Yeah, your attack gets boosted up by 30%, which isn't a small amount, and you have a potential of doing 200% of your attack onto a target, but you know, it's just really situational, and it is a bit of a risky move. So I kind of held off on him from that aspect because I felt like Gaff is more RNG dependent, but seems to be overall more stable, while this guy is definitely more of a manual unit, and basically you just have to know what you're doing and hopefully time things right. I don't think that he can't do like very good damage, but at this point in starting off here, I was like, I just want something that's more reliable to start off with right here, and maybe in the future I will come back and say this dude is the best one in the world, but until then, we're gonna move on. And next up we have, I believe I'm pronouncing that right, we have Shaha, who is a shadow type, and then her element is light. Now she is the first banner, and I'm going to go ahead and say it already, she appears to be absolutely incredible. I do not have her yet, I'm trying, but for her first move, Thrust, it deals 80% of her attack onto a target and shocks it for 3 turns with a 60% chance. Now I haven't seen this move being like actually used, but shock, at least in other games, basically makes the target either in a debuff state or in a state where they can't really act. And for 3 turns, that is an extremely large amount. Even if it only like debuffs their defense for a little bit, that's a really long time, which is absolutely bonkers. Moving on to Rolling Thunder, once again this one does 80% of her attack onto a target and shocks it for 3 turns with an 80% chance, and this is stackable up to 2 times. So from what I'm understanding is basically you can stock these shocks up to 2 times with this move, and that's absolutely nasty. So shock has to do some type of debuffing probabilities up there, and that is just absolutely incredible. Like, we have 2 moves, we haven't even gotten to her ult yet, and there's all kinds of shock action. And then Robust Lightning deals 160%. And then Robust Lightning, it deals 160% of her attack to all enemies and boosts damage based on shock state stack times and breaks the shock state afterwards. So here is where things get kind of crazy, you guys. So both of her other moves, which this one's just her normal attack, and then this one is her active skill, both build up to her ultimate. So the more shock stacks that you have on an enemy when she does this move, the more damage that you're going to get from it. I'm not sure how much shock affects this damage, but it seems like it's going to be a lot. So if you get the enemy in a state where shock stacks are just disgustingly high, there's a high probability you could either one-shot or severely damage a target. Not to mention, not just one target, but a lot of targets, because it hits all enemies, and with 160% base, that's still pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and say Ors, as I'm going to call her, because her name is a little bit awkward for me to say for whatever reason, is probably one of the best units already. Just going to go ahead and say that right now. I mean, it makes sense as her being the first banner, if you can get those shock debuffs to go off, but she's not part of the pickup. Well, not pick up, but she's not part of the tickets that we can select from, but I figured I would include her in there because she does exist. And then moving on, we have Sorey, and she is a slasher type, and then her element is water. So her active skill is Judgment, which deals 40% of her attack to all enemies and lowers defense by 70% with a 35% chance for 1 turn. Now, she is definitely a big pick in my book as well. I would definitely have loved to pick her up as well as Malavi at the same time, but I didn't choose to keep on rerolling because I had to do this for science. But while her damage to all targets isn't that much, 40%, this is a normal attack move. This is a move that you could spam every single round of a fight. And there's a not a high probability, but there's a probability that she can shred an enemy's defense by 70% with a 35% chance. That is a huge number. A huge number. Absolutely bonkers, dude. So already this seems to be like a very worthwhile unit. Moving on, next we have the Signet of Emperor, which deals 100% of attack onto a target and lowers defense by 70% with a 60% chance for 2 turns. Once again, this is more of a guaranteed, which you could probably use more towards a boss and basically shred their defense. And then you could come in with Gaff, or depending on if you have cast Carson, you could come up in there and do a whole bunch of damage, which once again, that's pretty good. Like that debuff stake for defense is absolutely crazy. And then her last skill, Merciless Bombardment, deals 100% of attack to all enemies and lowers defense by 70% with 50% chance for 2 turns, and it doubles damage under shield. I'm not exactly sure what double damage under shield means unless somebody is like trying to guard your move, but basically if someone's trying to tank something, this move is going to just rip them apart. So very incredible unit. Not so much based around damage, but based around more of a balance between damage and absolutely shredding enemies' defense. I would once again argue and say that this is probably one of the top 3 units that you should pick. Now, I know you're wondering, since I went ahead and went through all of the characters so far that we have available that you can get from the selection ticket, of what you should pick when you're rerolling. And to be honest, I think it's quite simple right here. I would definitely say that Malavi, which is the fire girl up here, who I ended up picking, at least on paper so far, is an extremely good pick to have once you're rerolling for whatever units that you should get. Next on that list, I would go ahead and say that Sorey is definitely a high pick on the list too. So if you can get if you can get both of those units together, I honestly think that's going to be a really good setup for you. You could always replace Malavi with either Gaff, who's a bit more RNG dependent, or you could go ahead and try out cast Carson. But I would end up picking Gaff over cast Carson because while more RG dependent, I do feel like he has a little bit more utility, while cast Carson is really just, you know, you have to be at the right moment, at the right time, and do a whole bunch of damage. But basically, Malavi, Sorey, or Sor, I can't decide how to pronounce her name, and then Gaff / cast Carson will probably end up being my top 3/4 picks for everyone out there that's just beginning the game. And then Ari, which is the conductor for the Arkham, is definitely a nice choice to have to coincide with these. But I would honestly say this chick right here, Sorey or Malavi, is probably going to be my top pick so far. And if you're watching this video and made it this far, make sure you pick up Ors, because she already seems very promising, but I could be wrong because this is one day into the game and this is nothing but pure speculation. But to those of you that have different units, feel free to leave a comment below in the video and explain to me, or just say what your opinion is on these units, just so we can have a more definitive reroll list for all of those coming into Eroica. And I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next one.